Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we try to get past the headlines and really look at the forces shaping our world. Today, we're heading into, well, a really unexpected story unfolding in West Africa. It's about Burkina Faso's bold new nuclear deal with Russia. Now, this isn't just some standard agreement. It feels like a strategic move, one that could, genuinely shake things up across West Africa. So our mission here is to unpack this. What are the motivations? What are the actual details of this deal? And what does it all mean? For Burkina Faso, the region, and frankly, global power dynamics. We often hear about Burkina Faso in terms of fragility, but this move, it tells a completely different story. It's about ambition. Okay, let's get into it. First off, you have to understand the context. Burkina Faso has been wrestling with just a severe energy crisis for decades. I mean, think about it. Over 60% of the population doesn't have electricity access, and for those who do, it's often rolling blackouts, flickering lights, an economy that basically has to stop when the sun goes down. It's tough. And this isn't just an energy issue, right? It cuts much deeper.
It's a development crisis, really. A healthcare crisis, you can't run equipment reliably. An education crisis, forget digital tools. And maybe most importantly, a sovereignty crisis. Without reliable power, how do you build factories? Keep hospitals running 24/7. Make sure schools can actually function in the modern world. It's fundamental.
Exactly. And what's really striking here is that turning to nuclear power, well, it wasn't some flashy or, trendy choice for Burkina Faso. It seems much more like a calculated decision, maybe desperate in some ways, but definitely calculated. They were facing a really tough energy problem. They did look at other options, of course. Solar, well, you've got all that sunshine, but the storage is incredibly expensive. And their grid infrastructure is, let's just say, weak. Hydropower. It's getting riskier with climate change making rainfall unpredictable.
And fossil fuels.
Yeah, costly imports, unstable supply lines. Precisely. So every sort of conventional path they look down seemed to hit a wall, a really significant barrier. And you have to connect this to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The whole playbook for nuclear power globally, it's really changed in the last, say, 2 decades. We're seeing these modular reactors now, much simpler designs, new kinds of international partnerships. It's genuinely opened the door for countries that maybe 20 years ago would have been considered too unstable or didn't have the money or just lacked the experience. So this shift makes a deal like this one not just, a possibility on paper, but a real strategic option for Ouagadougou.
That's a huge shift then. So for a country like Burkina Faso, this isn't just about watts and volts. It sounds like it's more fundamental, like taking back control.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fundamentally about control, and it's about playing the long game. Nuclear isn't a quick fix, let's be clear. It takes massive upfront investment, deep technical know-how. But once that infrastructure is in place, it can provide stable, uninterrupted baseload electricity for decades. That's the key, consistent, reliable power that doesn't care if the sun's shining or the wind's blowing.
They're crucial for development, yeah?
Totally. And the symbolism here is powerful too. For a country often painted as fragile or dependent, this deal makes Burkina Faso the first in its immediate neighborhood to take this kind of leap. It's a statement, right? We're not just waiting for handouts, we're aiming to be a technological leader, a pioneer among former colonies. That said, despite all the potential, it's still a high-stakes game. You absolutely need fuel security, you need meticulous waste management, and maybe most importantly, you need sustained public trust and political will. It's a huge commitment.
Okay, let's pivot to the other big player here. Russia. Why? Why would a nuclear superpower get so deeply involved with a country that, well, has no nuclear background, not much infrastructure, limited cash, and a tricky security situation?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the answer, I think, is that for Moscow, this is way more than just a commercial contract. It's clearly a strategic partnership. Russia is essentially stepping into a space that the West has, to some extent, vacated in West Africa recently.
A vacuum?
Kind of, yeah. And amidst this wave of what you might call post-colonial realignment. Think about Burkina Faso's recent moves. They kicked out French troops, they pulled out of the G5 Sahel alliance, they've deepened security ties with Russia, all while clearly saying, we want self-reliance, not Western dependency. And Russia comes in with this comprehensive offer. It's not just reactors, it's fuel supply, waste handling, training people, helping design the legal framework, even running public education programs.
Right, this idea of offering tools, not terms. Sounds appealing, especially if you're tired of conditional aid from the West. But is it really no strings attached? Or are there just different strings?
That's exactly the right question to ask. Look, Russia's motivations aren't purely altruistic, obviously. This deal gives Moscow something potentially more valuable than immediate profit. It gives them long-term influence. right in the heart of a region that's changing fast. West Africa used to be seen as, firmly in France's orbit now. It's becoming this subtle battleground for influence. And Russia's making gains not with armies necessarily, but with turbines and uranium. Because once your critical nuclear infrastructure is tied to a foreign power, well, that power gets deeply embedded in your energy security, your universities, your future policies. Russia gets this. They're playing the long game. Rosatom, their state nuclear company, is integrating itself into Burkina Faso science, its laws, its energy systems, tying the country's future pretty directly to Russian expertise and supply chains. And there's this narrative Russia's pushing to, we're the partner the global south deserves. You see it from Egypt to Zimbabwe. Moscow positions nuclear cooperation as a path to real autonomy, free from IMF conditions, free from Western geopolitical games, free from what they call green hypocrisy. Burkina Faso is just the latest chapter in that story. It reinforces Moscow's message, suggesting nations don't have to look only west anymore. And that sends a powerful signal to neighbors, right? Like Mali, Niger. They're watching this. They're also moving away from French influence and might be thinking about similar deals. Moscow wants to be seen as the model for technological independence, appealing to governments that feel they've been treated like, well, clients, not partners. So at the end of the day, Russia's decision. It was an act of calculation. The Kremlin sees that the future of global influence runs through Africa, and that influence won't be won by speeches. It'll be won by cables, reactors, and megawatts.
That's a really comprehensive look at the strategy behind it. But let's get practical. What does this cooperation actually look like on the ground? It sounds like way more than just a press release.
Oh, it absolutely is. The agreement they signed isn't just some energy contract. It's more like a sprawling, multi-layered construction schedule, almost a national transformation plan, you could say. And it unfolds in 4 very deliberate phases, each one designed to weave Rosatom deeper into the country's institutions. Okay, so phase 1. They call it the Milestone Zero Audit. This started pretty much right after the deal was inked. Rosatom teams came in to do this exhaustive review, looking at everything. Legal codes, insurance laws, emergency response plans, even zoning maps.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. The deliverables, expected in about 18 months, include a brand new standalone Nuclear Safety Act. And they're writing it line by line with lawyers from the IAEA, the global nuclear watchdog. That's important for legitimacy. They'll also nail down the financing. Russia covers 70% with a low-interest export credit line that's huge, eases the upfront burden. Burkina Faso finds the other 30%, likely through a new sovereign green bond. Plus, a security plan, integrating local forces, Russian advisors, satellite monitoring, the works, and crucially, they've agreed. No concrete gets poured until every single clause is ratified. Right, then phase 2. This kicks in automatically once that Safety Act is passed by Parliament. Now, instead of going straight for a huge power plant, Rosatom builds a smaller 50-megawatt modular research reactor to RMB B50 model outside Ouagadougou.
A research reactor, so not for powering the country.
Not directly for the grid, no. Its main job is to build up domestic nuclear capacity. Think of it like a high-tech training center and a specialized lab rolled into one. What will it do? Well, produce medical isotopes, say for cancer therapy at the main hospital, help certify gold purity for the mining sector using neutron activation labs, and provide a hands-on training simulator for Burkina Faso engineers. Rosatom's committed to supplying all the enriched uranium for the first 10 years. And this is critical, taking back all the spent fuel to Russia for reprocessing. That tackles a major waste headache up front. Then you get to phase 3. If that research reactor runs safely for 24 months straight, it triggers the next stage automatically. That's the construction of the main power plant, a twin 440-megawatt pressurized water plant. It's a version of their VVER 440 reactor, but adapted for the Sahel climate.
Okay, now we're talking serious power generation.
Yes. And Rosatom also commits to building the transmission lines needed, a 330 kilovolt backbone connecting key cities like Bobo Dioulasso, Cumbia, Tombo. And here's another interesting bit. 30% of the non-nuclear parts, things like concrete segments, rebar, they have to be made locally. The idea is to kickstart a domestic heavy industry. Plus, training. 500 Burkina Faso technicians will go through a new nuclear engineering faculty at Joseph Kaiserbo University. Funded by Moscow, yes, but deliberately staffed with African professors from Egypt, Nigeria, South Africa to counter any claims of, neo-colonial brainwashing. And finally, phase 4. This is about stewardship, the long term. After the plant is actually feeding power into the grid, a joint venture is created, Sanuki DF. Burkina Faso's state owns 51%, Rosatom 49%. That venture holds the license. And the profit split is locked for 25 years, guaranteeing Burkina Faso gets the majority of the revenue stream. There's even talk, penciled in for maybe 2035, of an in-country fuel fabrication facility. But that depends on finding commercially viable uranium nearby, perhaps near Markhoi, that could potentially supply Mali or Niger too under Russian oversight. And it goes even wider. Atomic physics is being added to school lessons. Civil service exams will have slots for radiation health officers. The Agriculture Ministry gets a special unit using radiation to develop drought-resistant crops like sorghum. It's about showing the benefits across society.
Wow. That is incredibly detailed. It really does sound like Rosatom isn't just wiring in a power plant. They're wiring themselves into, well, almost every ministry, classroom, industrial park. What are the long-term effects of that kind of deep integration? And, it brings up a really important question. Can a country facing serious security challenges with limited money and maybe some public doubts, can it actually see a nuclear program this huge through to the end?
That's the absolute crux of the matter, isn't it? For every megawatt promise, there are pretty significant forces, you could say enemies, that might want to pull the plug. Not everyone is cheering this on. The most immediate threat: domestic insurgents. Al-Qaeda, ISIS-linked groups, they're still active, particularly in the north and east. A big, shiny nuclear complex. That's a symbol of the state, of order. It's a potential target.
So how do they protect it?
Well, Russian security advisors are already working with the Burkina Faso military on a security perimeter strategy. They're apparently drawing on tactics used at other Rosatom sites in tricky regions. We're talking drones, satellite surveillance, biometric checks, sniper posts. A layered defense. But the threats aren't just internal. There are international actors who are, let's say, uneasy about this deal. France, for example, historically the dominant power in the region, right? Their influence has been waning, and seeing Ouagadougou turn so decisively to Moscow, well, it's likely seen as concerning, maybe even humiliating in some circles. French companies like EDF and Areva were apparently shut out of this deal. Reports suggest French diplomats might be quietly lobbying the IAEA or Western donors, raising safety concerns, maybe trying to delay insurance approvals, citing instability, things that could slow the project down. Some might call it slow-motion sabotage.
And the U.S.?
Publicly, they seem kind of indifferent, but privately, there's bound to be anxiety about Russia using these nuclear deals to deepen its strategic foothold across Africa. You see Western think tanks publishing pieces, casting doubt, raising fears, trying to shape the narrative and maybe delay things. And it's not just Western powers. Look within Africa itself. Nigeria, for instance. Nigeria has its own nuclear ambitions, but they haven't really gotten off the ground yet. If Burkina Faso, landlocked, poorer, facing security issues, suddenly leapfrogs ahead with Russian help, that could be embarrassing for Nigeria's elite. It could reset regional perceptions about who's really leading development.
Interesting dynamic.
And even inside Burkina Faso, you have opposition. The people importing fossil fuels. They stand to lose millions if diesel generators become obsolete. And some opposition politicians are warning about atomic colonialism, about giving away sovereignty to Russia.
So for Burkina Faso, nuclear power isn't just electricity. It's maybe a shield against energy poverty, against dependence, against being ignored on the world stage.
I think that's a good way to put it. And given all these challenges, building and maintaining public trust is absolutely vital. They have a strategy for that too. First, a big public awareness campaign. Billboards in the capital showing, smiling nurses using nuclear-powered medical machines, local radio spots explaining how radiation can make crops tougher. They even have this traveling atomic caravan, basically a science fair on wheels, going to markets, schools, mosques, letting ordinary people ask blunt questions. And crucially, it's Burkina Faso scientists providing the answers, not Russians, framing it as a national project. Second, they're really focused on developing their own people, human capital. They're not just importing skills, they're building them. Over 200 students already have scholarships for nuclear science in Russia, places like Tomsk, St. Petersburg. Others are studying nuclear law, ethics, radiation medicine. The clear goal. Within 10 years, they want every key job in their nuclear sector filled by a Burkina Faso national. Third, they're trying to connect nuclear tech to other parts of the economy to show it's not just this isolated thing. Agriculture, like we mentioned, using radiation for better seeds, less food spoilage. Healthcare, better diagnostic tools using locally made isotopes. Mining, using advanced techniques to verify the quality of gold and manganese exports. All these things aim to prove that nuclear energy is a national multiplier, that it benefits everyone, not just the grid operators. And finally, institutional strength. They're setting up a national nuclear authority, working with the African Commission on Nuclear Energy, AFCON. It's designed to be an independent watchdog to outlive political changes, provide strong oversight, to show the world and their own people that Burkina Faso isn't just borrowing power, it's mastering it.
It's an incredible undertaking. And if this actually works, if Burkina Faso pulls this off, it won't just light up their own cities. It really could light a path for others across Africa. Mali, Guinea, Togo, they'll all be watching very closely.
Absolutely. I think what this whole story really demonstrates is that nuclear power, maybe it's not just the preserve of wealthy, established nations anymore. Maybe it's becoming the weapon of choice, so to speak, for nations bold enough to try and wrestle back their own destiny, to redefine their future. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country, rich in resources but written off for decades, if they can split the atom, not in war, but in peace for hope, well, that defies every story usually told about what Africa is or what it's allowed to become.
A powerful thought. What does Burkina Faso's audacious bet truly reveal about what sovereignty and development mean in this rapidly shifting world we live in? Something to think about.